Picture a wind-swept plain where courage met catastrophe, the Battle of Little Bighorn. A defining clash etched in the annals of American history. Through the eyes of Edward Godfrey Jr., a battle-scarred officer of the Seventh Cavalry, we relive the heart-pounding chaos of Custer's last stand. Last episode, we uncovered Godfrey's gripping first-hand account. Tonight, we venture deeper into the unraveling of General Custer's daring yet doomed strategy, from the calculated moves along the Rosebud River to the fateful charge toward the Little Bighorn. What sparked this epic collision of cultures and ambitions? Join us as we dissect the critical decisions and unravel the threads of destiny that led to one of America's greatest military tragedies. Smash that button, subscribe, and saddle up for a journey into the heart of history. Let's uncover the truth together. One of the few remaining officers of the 7th Cavalry Regiment, Edward Godfrey Jr., is an experienced cavalryman who saw the Battle of Little Bighorn firsthand. A vital piece of the historical puzzle, his terrifying description of that fateful day illuminates the tragedies and victories of Custer's last stand. We examined Godfrey's eyewitness account in our previous episode, and tonight we'll go even further, examining fresh facets of the conflict. To help our community, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel before we start. At the mouth of the Rosebud River in Montana Territory, General Custer was given formal instructions dated June 22, 1876, which stated, Lieutenant Colonel, 7th Cavalry, Custer, when your regiment is ready, the Brigadier General commanding orders you to go up the Rosebud in search of the Indians, whose track Major Reno found a few days before. The department commander does not want to give specific commands that could impede your movements as you approach the enemy, because it is difficult to give clear directions for this movement. And even if it were, he has complete faith in your zeal, energy, and skill. However, he will express his opinions about your planned course of action and wants you to follow them unless you feel that you must deviate from them. He advises you to continue climbing the Rosebud until you can determine which way the aforementioned route leads. If it leads to the Little Horn, as it seems likely, he advises you to keep going south, perhaps all the way to the Tongue's headwaters, and then turn toward the Little Horn while continuously feeling to your left to keep the Indians from escaping to the south or southeast by going around your left flank. Colonel Gibbon's column is currently traveling to the Bighorn's mouth. When it gets there, it will traverse the Yellowstone and go up to the Big and Little Horns forks. At the very least, it is intended that the Indians, if they are on the Little Horn, will be almost completely surrounded by the two columns, making it impossible for them to flee. Of course, its future moves will be determined by events as they occur. The department commander asks that you investigate the upper portion of Tulloch Creek in detail while traveling up the Rosebud, and try to send a scout to Colonel Gibbon's column with information about what you find. A group of troops under Colonel Gibbon's direction will investigate the creek's bottom portion. If the river allows, the supply steamer will be driven all the way up the Bighorn to the forks. Colonel Gibbon's column will be accompanied by the department commander, who wants you to report to him there as soon as your troops' rations run out, barring any more orders you receive in the interim. With utmost respect, your dutiful servant, Captain E.W. Smith, Acting Assistant Adjutant General, 18th Infantry. General Custer received clear orders that precisely identified the Indians' location. Some authors have suggested that General Custer knew of this strategy and that General Terry's command would reach the mouth of the Little Bighorn on June 26th. Furthermore, some people believe that the two directives were supposed to meet at that location on that particular date. However, General Terry's orders did not say when his command would get there. and as his forces were only allowed to ration for 15 days, General Custer was not supposed to arrive before July 5th or 6th. On June 22nd, the regiment marched out of camp in a column of fours, with each troop being followed by its pack mules. After the forward command was sounded at noon, Generals Terry, Gibbon, and Custer reviewed the regiment stationed near the line of march. General Terry offered a pleasant word to each officer as he returned their salute. The pack trains proved troublesome at the outset, with cargoes falling off before leaving camp and the mules straggling badly throughout the day. However, after Lieutenant Matt took charge of the pack trains, their efficiency improved significantly and they remained well organized. After encountering the Indian Trail, the regiment encamped at 4:00 p.m., having marched 12 miles. At sunset, officer call was sounded, and the officers assembled at General Custer's bivouac, squatting in groups around his bed. The atmosphere was solemn. There was little talk. Speaking to the officers, General Custer said that marches would start at precisely 5:00 in the morning, and that trumpet calls would only be made in an emergency. He underlined that troop commanders were seasoned officers who could effectively lead their troops, and that just two things would be controlled from his headquarters: the departure and camp arrival times. The troop commanders would have the final say over all other matters, including halting, grazing, watering, stables, reveille, and so forth. He emphasized the significance of keeping a supporting distance, not moving too close to the column, and not moving too far ahead of the scouts. General Custer stated that he relied on the officers' devotion, judgment, and prudence, predicting that they may run into at least 1,000 warriors, possibly with the help of young men from the agencies, for a total of 1,500. General Custer had reviewed the Commissioner of Indian Affairs reports, Washington officials, and affairs to calculate the number of hostiles or Indians who declined to join organizations. These findings gave him the confidence that the opposing army would not number more than 1,500. Custer rejected General Terry's offer of more Second Cavalry soldiers, arguing that the Seventh Cavalry was capable of routing any force that may get together to oppose them. Furthermore, he turned down the offer of Gatling guns because of concern that their movements would be impeded by subpar horses and difficult terrain. Officers were advised to save supplies and the strength of their horses and mules because they might be out for a long time. The regiment would march 25 to 30 miles every day. Custer rarely expressed his opinion so candidly. Thus, his speech to his officers was out of the ordinary. In an unusual move, he trusted his subordinates and demonstrated a readiness to hear suggestions. His accommodative, quiet, and slightly appealing demeanor made a lasting effect on everyone in attendance. Lieutenants McIntosh, Wallace, and Godfrey walked silently to their bivouac as the officers scattered. Then Wallace said, "Godfrey, I think General Custer is going to be killed." Wallace said, "I have never heard Custer talking that way before." In response to Godfrey's question on why he felt that way, he gave orders for the silent reveille and morning details as he took care of his men's preparations in the event of a night attack. He also gave instructions. The stable guard, packers, and cooks were to instantly calm and guard the horses and mules, while the rest of the men gathered at a specified rendezvous to await orders. Without an officer's order, no one was allowed to shoot. After that, he checked the herd to make sure the animals were safe. As he was doing this, he noticed Mitch Boyer, Bloody Knife, Half Yellow Face, and other people talking in the Indian Scouts' bivouac. He said yes when Boyer asked if he had ever engaged in combat with the Sioux. When he asked how many Sioux were anticipated, he gave him an estimate of 1,000 to 1,500. When Boyer asked if he believed they could beat them, he said with assurance, "Oh yeah, I suppose so. Boyer underlined, "Well, I can tell you, we are going to have a damn big fight." After interpreting their exchange with two sergeants carrying his personal flag and the regimental standard, General Custer mounted and started the march up the Rosebud at 5 in the morning on June 23rd. This gave the order to mount and proceed. They came upon the first Indian camping area 8 miles in, which suggested a sizable hamlet. They thought the many wickiups and bush shelters they saw were for dogs, but they subsequently learned they were makeshift shelters for agency transients. Everyone was occupied with determining the age of pony droppings, tracks, and lodge trails in order to estimate the number of lodges. As they traveled through 3 camping areas, stopping at each one, their discussions were dominated by these subjects. After marching 33 kilometers, they camped around 5 p.m. Melmsum. On June 24th, they found several camping sites that appeared to be of comparable strength. In actuality, these were continuous camps of different bands, not the sequential camps of the same town as they had imagined. At the time, they did not find it particularly noteworthy that they appeared to be of the same age. They discovered the frame of a Sundance lodge with a white man's scalp inside after passing a larger camp where the grass had been trampled by large herds. Here, agency-affiliated Indians had joined the hostiles. Their Crow Scouts had found new signs, such as pony traces and an Indian on foot. So the command stopped, and the officers gathered. As they prepared to separate, a southerly breeze blew down General Custer's headquarters flag, which fell to their rear. After picking it up and replanting the staff, it fell once more. Then he used a sagebrush to secure it. At the time, this occurrence didn't seem like much, but Lieutenant Wallace later described it as a horrible portent that predicted their downfall. The march that day was tiresome, with numerous extended stops to give the scouts time to work. To reduce dust clouds, they marched on different pathways, and there were large herds of ponies visible throughout the valley. Signal smokes were reported, but not confirmed. After marching 28 miles, they set up camp beneath a bluff at dusk, concealing the command as much as possible. After dinner, the fires were put out. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Lieutenant Hare and Godfrey retired for a quick nap. During their slumber, they were interrupted by a voice saying, "He's over there by that tree," indicating Godfrey's location. When he asked what the summons was for, he was informed that General Custer wanted all officers to go to headquarters right away. With just a single candlelight for guidance, they forewent their much-needed slumber and made their way through thickets, sleeping soldiers, and horse herds in search of headquarters. Upon arriving, General Custer informed them that the track led to the Little Bighorn, and they would immediately march to conceal themselves near the divide before dawn. This would give time to prepare the attack on the 26th, find the settlement, and analyze the terrain. Lieutenant Hare joined the scouts, but the rest of them went back to their units. Due to the noise and dust, it was hard to see or hear during the night march. The dust cloud served as their guide, and they occasionally heard whistling or hallooing. Troops were eventually dispatched in advance to hear any noises coming from the scouts. On June 25th, around 2 a.m., they paused to await scouts' updates after marching roughly 10 kilometers. Coffee was prepared when some troops unsaddled their horses to rest, but the alkaline water made it unfit for human consumption. General Custer gave instructions to get ready for the march and shared information from the scouts regarding the locations of the Indian settlements with each troop before 1 a.m. While riding bareback before exiting, Godfrey noticed General Custer having a serious chat with Bloody Knife, other scouts, and an interpreter. Bloody Knife said that they would locate enough Sioux to battle for 2 or 3 days, and the scouts seemed anxious. General Custer grinned and said, "I suppose we'll finish them in a day." Their march began at 8 a.m. and ended at 10:30 a.m. in a ravine. They were advised to remain silent, cover themselves, and avoid revealing their existence to the enemy. They had covered almost 10 miles of marching. It is common for a commander in Indian combat to get the chance to reconnoiter the enemy's position during the day, particularly if the Indians are aware that the troops are present. When following an Indian route, the markers show the time since the Indians' presence in order to prepare for a surprise attack at dawn. The commander assesses their distance and tries to arrive at the Indian village at night. If the signs point to a hot track, the attack must be launched quickly, frequently, without knowing the exact numbers of the opposing forces beyond what is learned or inferred from the trail. Attack preparations are done in secret, and a successful surprise depends on chance. It is very impossible to approach without being noticed if the move is done during the day. In the past, when the Indians realized the troops were there, they would rush to attack, try roses to trick them, hold up their approach, and let their women and children flee with their possessions and herd of ponies, making it challenging to pursue them. On the other hand, civilized warfare permits adversaries to engage in combat for prolonged periods of time, and conflicts can be fought with a reasonable awareness of one another's numbers and places. An attack does not always follow from complete awareness of the enemy's presence. Touch and go is the rule in Indian battle, and people who are solely experienced with civilized fighting frequently misunderstand its unpredictable character. The Indians were fully expecting a conflict and were aware that the troops were in the field, but it wasn't until the morning of the combat day that they realized how near their column was. That morning, a number of young men had departed from the hostile camp to go to an agency in Nebraska. They warned that the troops were coming after returning to the village after observing the dust that their forces were raising. The attack was therefore not unexpected. For 2 or 3 days, the Indian camp had been positioned at the attack site. Instead of being the battlefield, the site was picked because it was a practical place to camp along the river valley. The Indians usually camped in groups of several miles apart, with each band occupying a distinct territory. However, the village had gathered in expectation of Sitting Bull's prophecy coming true. The Little Bighorn River, also known as Greasy Grass by the Indians, is a twisting mountain stream 20 to 40 yards wide with a pebbled bottom and abrupt, soft walls. Depending on the channel's breadth, the water's depth usually ranges from 2 to 5 feet. The river swings northwest to meet the Bighorn River after flowing northeast to the Little Bighorn battlefields. The surrounding landscape includes an undulating prairie plateau between the Little Bighorn and Bighorn Rivers, as well as the Little Chief or Wolf Mountains between the Little Bighorn and Rosebud Rivers. Instead of a rocky upheaval or mountain chain, this mountainous area is defined by deep, narrow gulches, high precipitous slopes, and rugged, shattered terrain near the top of the mountains. The command had traced the path up a Rosebud branch, creating the divide. The divide between Tulloch's Fork and the Little Bighorn was to their right. Sundance Creek, Benteen Creek, or Reno's Creek is the name of the creek that empties the watershed to their right and front. The trail was steep and tortuous, following the valley and bed of this creek's south branch, which was mostly dry. Scouts from the divide between the Little Bighorn and Rosebud saw flames rising over the hamlet and pony herds grazing in the Little Bighorn Valley, which was about 12 to 15 miles away. While the column was stopped in the ravine, General Custer had moved to this viewpoint. The settlement was hidden by high bluffs, making it impossible to find more enemies than the scouts had previously reported. While some of their officers sought solitude, sleep, or meditation, others congregated in groups to analyze the issue. Their medicine man anointed and called upon the Great Spirit to protect the reservation scouts, who had not been active for a while. They appeared to be certain that there would be more Sioux than they could manage. During the night march, Captain Yates's troop misplaced a pack of hard bread. A detail was dispatched back to retrieve it. The detail had returned, according to Captain Keogh and Sergeant Curtis, who reported seeing an Indian using his tomahawk to open a box of hard bread. When the Indian saw the soldiers, he ran away. General Custer was quickly informed with this information, and he heard the officer's call. Captain Keogh's information was repeated by the general, who also reported that scouts had spotted Indians watching their activities along the ridge that overlooked the valley. He thought that since their presence had been detected, there was no need for more secrecy. To prevent the village from fleeing, he resolved to assault it right away rather than waiting until the next morning. Troop commanders were instructed to report preparedness, examine their troops, and accompany the pack with 6 men and 1 non-commissioned officer. After receiving order reports, the troops would line up in the marching column, with a final person to report escorting the pack train. The column set out again when the inspections were quickly finished. Just before midday, they traversed the crest that separated the Little Bighorn and Rosebud basins. The regiment was split up into battalions shortly after. Major Reno's advanced battalion included Troop M, led by Captain French, Troop A, led by Captain Moylan and Lieutenant DeRudio, Troop G, led by Lieutenants McIntosh and Wallace, Indian Scouts, led by Lieutenants Varnum and Hare, Interpreter Gerard, Lieutenant Hodgson as acting adjutant, and Doctors DeWolf and Porter for medical duties. Troop H, commanded by Captain Benteen and Lieutenant Gibson. Troop D, commanded by Captain Weir and Lieutenant Edgerly. And Troop K, commanded by Lieutenant Godfrey, made up Captain Benteen's unit. Troop B, under the command of Captain McDougall, escorted the pack train, which was led by Lieutenant Matthey. Major Reno's battalion marched down a valley that became the south branch of a minor tributary to the Little Bighorn, known as Sundance Benteen's, or Reno's Creek. The Indian Trail wound through this valley's twists and turns, while the pack train followed their path. Custer's column trailed Reno's closely, bearing to the right and rear. Captain Benteen's unit was directed to the left in front, towards a line of high bluffs some 3 to 4 miles away. Benteen was told to combat any enemy he came across and to report anything he saw to Custer. He was to march to the next line of bluffs and so on until he could see the Little Bighorn Valley. If he arrived at the high bluffs without seeing the enemy, General Custer clearly thought that the Indians would not hold up to an attack during the day, and that some would try to flee up the Little Bighorn Valley with their families, ponies, and other obstacles. Custer probably intended to stop them and force them to return to the village. His choice to move Benteen's battalion to the left was likely influenced by this notion, as well as the potential for the hamlet to be spread out over several miles along the valley. Benteen had to march across vast valleys and rugged, steep slopes. The rough terrain was not immediately apparent from the perspective of battalion organization, but as they advanced, it grew more difficult. Lieutenant Gibson was sent ahead to relieve the pressure, but he failed to spot any enemy and informed Benteen of the outcome of his reconnaissance. The battalion was forced to the right by the obstructions, and after a mile or so, they were able to see the trail. The ascending and lowering caused a significant deal of exhaustion in many horses, and some of them fell far behind the column. Benteen made the astute decision to follow the remainder of the command's path, and they joined it right before the pack train. During the march, They periodically encountered Custer's battalion, which was distinguishable by their gray horses in fast pace. 2 or 3 times, they heard raucous applause and a few bullets. However, the reason for these protests is not understood. They reached a waterhole, sometimes known as a morass, where a stream of flowing water began after they joined the trail. In order to water the horses, Benteen stopped the battalion. They heard firing beforehand while watering and, becoming irritated with the wait, began with his troops and advanced, despite his position being second in the column. The rest of the battalion eventually caught up with Weir. The Little Bighorn and the Reno battleground were now several miles away. When the pack train pulled up outside the waterhole, the thirsty mules, who hadn't had any water since the night before, dove into the abyss in spite of the packers' attempts to keep them from doing so. On June 17th, they passed a moldering teepee carrying the body of a warrior killed in a combat with Crook's forces on the Rosebud. The teepee was likely lit by scouts before Reno reached the burning teepee, where a few Indians were spotted. The battalions led by Custer and Reno did not come into contact with any. These Indians kept a safe distance to encourage pursuit, rather than seeming alarmed by the troops' presence or attempting to halt the column. They were carefully followed by Reno's command and scouts until he was told to advance quickly and then charge the village with the entire group backing him. This directive was issued close to the burning teepee. According to Reno's official report, Lieutenant Cook, adjutant, advised him that the town was only 2 miles ahead and fleeing, prompting him to issue the aforementioned order. The trail proceeded through the Little Bighorn Valley, which is typically flat and between 1 and 2 miles wide. The creek is lined with heavy forest, particularly in the bends, which blocked the main village's view until Reno got as far as he could. After crossing a ford on the Indian Trail, Reno proceeded up the valley. Between this ford and another 3.5 miles below, a hill rises abruptly from the valley, paralleling the river. After leading his troop to the river at a trot, Reno took a moment to reorganize the column and water the horses. The enemy was in front of him, and he informed Custer that they were powerful. Custer had pushed to the right, away from Reno, where the river and high bluffs separated them. Before forming the battalion in line of battle across the valley and thereafter deploying as skirmishers, Reno advanced in a column of 4s. The hostiles treated firing now and then, but they didn't try hard to stop Reno's approach. But when 2 men's horses got uncontrollable and dragged them into the Indian camp, the Indians mustered enormous force, started a fierce fire, and fled into the left flank's foothills. The reservation scouts left the field and ran away as the Indians approached their town, and Reno lost sight of Custer or any outside help. He understood he was falling into a trap. He made the decision to protect himself and gave up the mounted attack. Reno yelled, "Stop that noise!" when the troops started cheering in response to the hostiles' whoops during the advance. Reno dismounted his command to fight on foot instead of charging the village because he could not see the entire group within supporting distance. The Indians and scouts moved around the left flank, causing the left to retreat. The command took cover amid the forest and the ancient riverbed's bank. At this stage, Reno had suffered a painful defeat. It was a sturdy position, with the bank and fringe of timbers protecting it in front and the timbers providing some cover in the back. The duration of their stay in the bottom after a forceful onslaught is disputed, with estimates ranging from a few minutes to an hour. Reno suffered minimal casualties while he was there, with other Indians on the other side of the river firing from the back of the emplacement. The hostiles had him all but surrounded. He ordered everyone to mount and reach the bluffs after 1 man was slain near Reno. But this command was not widely heard or conveyed. He reaffirmed the order after countermanding it, but it was not universally accepted this time. Those who saw what people were doing close to Reno alerted their unit leaders, who then ordered them to mount. Many soldiers were unaware of the order until it was too late to comply, due to the cacophony of firing and their concentration on the enemy. Some stayed hidden until the Indians departed, after which they came out. Others stayed till nightfall and fled. Reno led the withdrawal while his command left the troop and lower organizations in a column, but in a straggling posture. He threw them aside after he had used up all of his revolver rounds. Reno had to find a different ford after the hostile force forced their retreat to the left, where they hit the river at an affordable location. The command became stuck and lost all organization as it ascended a funnel-shaped gully into the bluffs via a pony route. There was no organized opposition throughout this retreat, and the Indians fired at them ineffectively. Surprisingly, men and horses scaled the steep inclines in the thrill of peril. Lieutenant Donald McIntosh died shortly after leaving the timber, a few ways from the command. Dr. DeWolf was killed while climbing one of the bluffs. The horse owned by Lieutenant B.H. Hodgson jumped into the river from the bank and died, while the lieutenant was wounded in the leg, most likely by the same gunshot that killed the horse. "God forbid you leave me," Hodgson screamed. He received assurances that he wouldn't be abandoned. After grabbing a fellow soldier's stirrup strap, Hodgson was carried across the creek, but was shot and killed shortly after. Hodgson had earlier declared that he planned to grab someone's stirrup to help himself leave the field in the event that he was dismounted or injured in combat. Private Diver of Troop F got into a hand-to-hand fight with an Indian during the retreat.